This is the date on which the ring was destroyed. And this is a little taster for the 3 classes I'm doing on Tolkien, with which we'll conclude the course, in fact. So let's go on to the Brideshead Revisited. So I was thinking about the best way of trying to do what we need to do with the one session we have left, and I want to try to keep it to about 50 minutes so that we can have a Q&A, so be thinking about your questions. And I thought what we would do, actually, we would put Lady Marshman on trial and decide whether she's the problem, or at least part of the problem, or not. So I'm going to go through the text, looking at Lady Marshman's role in it, and it helps us to enlighten the rest of the text as well. And also we would get to Good Friday, and we're in Holy Week now, of course, get to Good Friday and Easter Sunday before the end of the next 50 minutes. You haven't got to bother with Holy Week. We can get the whole thing done in the next 45 minutes. Okay, so I mentioned this briefly last week about the fact that, or at the bottom of page 63, if you have my edition, Sebastian speaking, "I've been to Mass at the Old Palace," he said. "Haven't been all this term. And Monsignor Bell asked me to dinner twice last week, and I know what that means. Mummy's been writing to him. So I sat bang in front where he couldn't help seeing me and absolutely shouted the Hail Marys at the end. So that's over." And he changes the subject. So, again, we talked about this last week. So he hadn't, Mummy is obviously friends with Monsignor Bell, and she's worried about her son, and so he wants to make sure he's seen at Mass, but he goes to the low Mass to get over with as quickly as possible. It's the first time he's been in the semester, so he's not practicing. And is his mother interfering? All right, let's move on to page 98. I think next is where I want to talk about. So first of all, I mentioned this last week as well about the fact that about 10 lines down, I wonder if I should have been like that if I'd gone to Stonyhurst. I should have gone, only Papa went abroad before I was old enough, and the first thing he insisted on was my going to Eton. So following Lord Marshman's desertion of his family, when he doesn't return home from World War I and ends up living with a concubine in Italy, he insists that his younger son's not going to go to Stonyhurst, which is the Jesuit high school, but he's going to go to Eton, which was originally nominally an Anglican high school, but to all intents and purposes a secular education. And we see the way that both Bridie and Sebastian see things, how they understand reality, is connected to the sort of education that they had. The bottom of that page, so you see we're a mixed family religiously. Brideshead and Cordelia are both fervent Catholics. He's miserable, she's bird happy. Julia and I are half heathen. I am happy, I rather think Julia isn't. Mummy is popularly believed to be a saint, and Papa is excommunicated. And I wouldn't know which of them was happy. Anyway, however you look at it, happiness doesn't seem to have much to do with it, and that's all I want. I wish I liked Catholics more. This is Sebastian speaking, of course. So the family's mixed up. The one thing I want you to invite you to think about here is always be aware of the voice speaking. So this is Sebastian's view. He thinks that Brideshead is miserable. I would say that's arguable. Cordelia is bird happy, and that's probably fair enough at this stage. He thinks he's happy, and we know insofar as he is happy, it's a superficial happiness. Now, I think Julia isn't, and she probably isn't, for reasons we discover. Mama is popularly believed to be a saint, okay, and Papa is excommunicated. And I don't know which of them is happy. All right. That's immediately before we first see Cordelia, where there's the intertextual reference to King Lear. So then we move on to page 101. This is Brideshead speaking, bottom of the page. "I saw the bishop in London last week. You know he wants to close our chapel." "Oh, he couldn't," said Cordelia. I don't think Mummy will let him, said Sebastian. So Mum is not popularly believed to be a saint. She's also apparently popularly believed to be the Pope. It's too far away, said Brideshead. There are a dozen families round Melstead who can't get here. He wants to open a mass centre there. But what about us, said Sebastian. Do we have to drive out on winter mornings? We must have the Blessed Sacrament here, said Cordelia. I like popping in at odd times. So does Mummy. So do I, said Brideshead, but there are so few of us. It's not as though we were old Catholics with everyone on the estate coming to Mass. It'll have to go sooner or later, perhaps after Mummy's time. The point is whether it wouldn't be better to let it go now. All right, so we get the different approaches to the faith there. Because Sebastian, what about us? Right? He doesn't care about the Blessed Sacrament. He doesn't want the idea of having to get up and go to Mass anyway. But having to get up and go to Mass by putting on winter clothes on a winter's morning, having to go into town or the nearest village to go to Mass, that's just too much trouble. Bridie's very practical. And what's about the common good, right? It's not about what we want. He likes visiting the Blessed Sacrament as much as his mother does, as much as Cordelia does, but it's what's the common good. And you look at Brideshead, he's very much someone who understands the church. When the general strike happens, 1926, he doesn't take the side of the strike breakers, as a member of the aristocracy, because he's not convinced of the justice of the cause. He has a Catholic understanding of capitalism and socialism. The man understands his faith, unlike Sebastian. All right, so there we have about it being closed down. I'm going to desist from saying more from those pages because it's off topic and we don't have a lot of time. Let's move on to page 113. All right, this is very interesting. This is when Charles and Sebastian visit Lord Marshman in Venice, and they meet Cara. So the woman with whom Lord Marshman is, I suppose, to use the terminology, living in sin. But she's very, very interesting person. We talked about her briefly last week, if you remember, Cara. Do you think he loves me? Says Cara to Charles. And of course, this embarrasses Charles. How do you expect him to answer that? She answers it herself in that case. He does not. Well, not the littlest piece. Then why does he stay with me? I will tell you. Because I protect him from Lady Marshman. He hates her. But you can have no conception how he hates her. Skip a few lines down. My friend, he is a volcano of hate. He cannot breathe the same air as she. He will not set foot in England because it is her home. He can scarcely be happy with Sebastian because he is her son. But Sebastian hates her too. I'm sure you're wrong there. He may not admit it to you. He may not admit it to himself. They are full of hate. Hate of themselves. Alex and his family. Why do you think he will never go into society? Well, we'll stop it there. So this is, again, very intriguing. She's not neutral per se, but she's an outsider. She has an element of detachment. She seems to see things clearly. This hatred that Lord Marshman and Sebastian, she says, have for Lady Marshman is rooted in a self-hatred. They hate themselves. Full of hate of themselves. So what's the connection between this self-hatred of Sebastian and Lord Marshman and their hatred of Lady Marshman? Is the latter a projection, a scapegoat, that perhaps she is everything that they know they probably should be and don't want to be, and they despise her for it? I'm giving the case for the defence, am I? Where are we next then? That's 113. Oh, yes, carries on. So next page, 3 lines down. And all for Lady Marshman. He will not touch a hand which may have touched hers. And then he talks about Sebastian. Sebastian is in love with his own childhood. That will make him very unhappy. His teddy bear, his nanny, and he is 19 years old. So again, it's not the difference, but it's the difference between Christ saying that we need to be childlike in order to get into the kingdom of heaven. We have to retain a healthy sense of wonder about, as Chesterton said, we don't live in the best of all possible worlds. We live in the best of all impossible worlds. In other words, we're in the midst of a miracle, and therefore we should be seeing reality through eyes wide open with wonder. That's being childlike. That's what's necessary to get into the kingdom of heaven. But we're not meant to be childish, because St. Paul says, when I was a child, I behaved as a child, but now I've put away childish things. So we are meant to grow up. There's a difference between being childlike, which is good, and childish, which isn't. So Sebastian does not want the responsibility of being a grown-up, because growing up requires responsibility, acting in accordance with those responsibilities, not doing what we want, not escaping from responsibility, if you like the teddy bear, etc. And then we have Sebastian drinks so much. We talked about this last week, so I don't need to say too much more about it. But again, she's very good here. I suppose we both do, says, well, I drink too much too. With you it does not matter. I have watched you together. With Sebastian it is different. He will be a drunkard if someone does not come to stop him. I have known so many. Alex was nearly a drunkard when he met me. It is in the blood. I see it in the way Sebastian drinks. It is not your way. Okay, so again we have this, the time in the novel when Lady Marshman's least lovable, perhaps, is when she's trying to come to grips with Sebastian's drunkenness. And we'll come to that in a minute. But this is Cara. He will be a drunkard if someone does not come to stop him. Because the question, Cordelia, God bless her, and I love Cordelia. She's the real teddy bear in the whole thing. She sneaks Wilcox's keys and gets whiskey for Sebastian and facilitates his drunkenness in her naivete, perhaps. But that's nicer than forcing him to go cold turkey by keeping everything under lock and key. We feel sorry for Sebastian. We think maybe that Lady Marshman is harsh and hard. But this is the other woman, if you like, in Lord Marshman's life. He will be a drunkard if someone does not come to stop him. What do we do when we have someone close to us who is addicted, who is an addict? How do we cope with that addiction? What should we do? All right, let's move on to, that was page 115. Page 122. This is that paragraph, the only full paragraph on the page. It was thus that Lady Marshman found us when, early in that Michaelmas term, she came for a week to Oxford. She found Sebastian subdued, with all his host of friends reduced to one, myself. She accepted me as Sebastian's friend and sought to make me hers also, and in doing so, unwittingly struck at the roots of our friendship. That is the single reproach I have to set against her abundant kindness to me. Now remember, this is Charles speaking, but this is the mature Charles, right? The Charles who's narrating as a 39-year-old, looking back on things. So Lady Marshman accepts accepts Charles as Sebastian's friend, and in doing so, strikes at the roots of their friendship. Key word there, though, unwittingly struck at the roots of our friendship. So Charles's view, none of this is malicious. She's just trying to be friendly and accommodating. But insofar as she's making friends with Charles, the more she becomes friends with Charles, the more Sebastian's annoyed with Charles for being friends with his mother. So this unwittingly, and then this is the single reproach I have to set against her abundant kindness to me. This is the mature Charles's judgment on things. That the only thing he can reproach her for is something that there's nothing to reproach her for. An unwitting act of friendship. Is that something that anybody should be reproached for? Abundant kindness. I'm probably upsetting some people because she's a touchstone. She's a catalyst. And some people don't like her. She's not very cuddly. She's not like Cordelia. So then they end up in this brothel. It's actually quite interesting because, as they're going to go to this brothel, there's an angel. They meet an angel. The angels are drunk. How many drunken angels have you met in your life? So 3/4 of the way down, page 128. A commissionaire at one side of a dark doorway and a middle-aged man in evening dress on the other side of it, standing with his face to the wall, cooling his forehead on the bricks, indicated our destination. "Keep out, you'll be poisoned," said the middle-aged man. So the drunk, with his head resting. "You'll be robbed, poisoned, and infected and robbed," said the middle-aged man. Now, of course, I'm not suggesting that he is literally a guardian angel, but I am suggesting that the word angel means messenger. And I'm also reminding all of us that in the preface to the second edition, we don't want to forget this at our peril, that the star of the show, the main protagonist, is God's providence. It's a working of divine providence in the lives of various individuals. They're given a providential warning here not to proceed. Crossing the threshold would be a big mistake. And then we have symbolism, because the two prostitutes, when they're introduced to here, 3 lines down, one had the face of a skull, the other of a sickly child. The death's head, capital D, capital H, seemed destined for me. So again, the recurring motif in Christian literature throughout the centuries has been the memento mori, the reminder of death, which is always meant to remind us of the 4 last things: death, judgment, heaven, and hell. War chooses to describe, or Charles, as the narrator, chooses to describe the 2 prostitutes in terms that remind us of death. Once even the death's head, a skull. And then so it all ends up badly, of course. They get drunk and they get arrested. And then top of page 137, how does Sebastian respond? "I know Mummy will make it seem she has to bear the whole brunt of the business. Somehow or other, the fact that he has chosen to get drunk, go to a brothel, crash a car, Mummy will make it seem that she has to bear the whole brunt of the business. Somehow it's Mother's fault that he's done this." Very next page, right? So War wants us to make this connection. Julia speaking of the same thing, speaking of her family. "Ours are awful. Poor Mummy is in for a ghastly time with them. They'll be writing letters and paying visits of sympathy, and all the time at the back of their minds, one half will be saying, 'That's what comes of bringing the boy up a Catholic,' and the other half will say, 'That's what comes of sending him to Eton instead of Stonyhurst. Poor Mummy can't get it right.'" Now, Julia is no friend of her mother's either. And you'd be thinking about what is it about Julia and Sebastian with their relationship with their mother. But here, this unsympathetic voice is basically contradicting the voice of Sebastian. Yeah, it's going to be hell for her mother. Sebastian has created a situation that's going to make life, his mother, hell. But for Sebastian, poor Mummy will make it seem as though she takes the whole brunt of the thing. Not seem, she is going to take the whole brunt of the thing. All right, let's move on. Page 141. Presently, Lady Marshman's party returned, just over halfway down. And when, before we went upstairs to dress for dinner, she said, "Who's come to chapel for the rosary?" And Sebastian and Julia said they must have their baths at once. Mr. Samgrass went with her and the friar. Very interesting. Mr. Samgrass is a cynical, almost certainly an atheist, social climber. But it's very interesting. One little comment here for those of you interested in theology, page 140. Mr. Samgrass says, "Our hostess," that's Lady Marshman, "remained at home. Also a convalescent Dominican who has read too much Maritain and too little Hegel." If you know your philosophy, Maritain, of course, is a Thomist, a follower of St. Thomas Aquinas, in other words, an authentic Catholic. Hegel is someone whose understanding of philosophy is rooted in historical progress, Hegelianism. So for Mr. Samgrass, this Dominican is actually, his problem is he's orthodox, basically, is what he's saying. All right, let's move on. page 142. Religion predominated in the house, not only in its practices, the daily mass and rosary, morning and evening in the chapel, but in all its intercourse. We must make a Catholic of Charles, Lady Marshman said, and we had many little talks together during my visits when she delicately steered the subject into a holy quarter. After the first of these, Sebastian says, "Has Mummy been having one of her little talks with you? She's always doing it. I wish to hell she wouldn't." Careless use of language there, but on the part of Sebastian, I wish to hell she wouldn't, but not a careless use of language, I would suggest, on the part of Evening War, in putting those words into his mouth. Okay, where are we? Brideshead, being very detached, very philosophical, very trying to understand the dignity of the human person at all times with Brideshead, says about 10 lines up, "You can't stop people if they want to get drunk. My mother couldn't stop my father, you know." So was Lady Marshman interfering in trying to stop Lord Marshman's drunkenness? According to Cara, his drinking habits were similar to Sebastian's, or Sebastian's were in danger of becoming similar to Lord Marshman's. Was Lady Marshman a nag? Did she nag him? Was she a nuisance? Was she a pest? Should she be surprised when Lord Marshman couldn't take it anymore and deserted her and the children? Is it her fault? Lord Marshman might say so. Next paragraph, or last paragraph. It was the custom, I learned later, this is important because this is where one of the key metaphors is explained. It was the custom, I learned later, always to ask Lady Marshman to read aloud on evenings of family tension. She had a beautiful voice and great humour of expression. That night she read part of the Wisdom of Father Brown. Julia sat with a stool covered with manicure things and carefully revarnished her nails. Cordelia nursed Julia's Pekingese. Brideshead played patience. I sat unoccupied, studying the pretty group they made and mourning my friend upstairs. Patience, I'm sure you know patience is what America's called solitaire, right? That's what he's playing. You get footnotes as well thrown in here. Look at that. What more could you want? So we're not told here, but this is because Cordelia tells us later when Father Brown says that the criminal can go off to the end of the world, but God brings him back with a twitch upon the thread. So this metaphor of the fish wanting to go exactly where it likes, but if it's attached to the thread, which is grace, it can be pulled against its will, not where it wants to go, but where it needs to go. Okay, so that's why the whole last part of the book is called a twitch upon the thread, from this story from the Wisdom of Father Brown that Lady Marshman read that evening. She presumably chose the story to read. All right, page 153. So this is Lady Marshman not, confronting Charles following Sebastian's drunkenness. About halfway down that page. "I wish I had not seen him," she said. "That was cruel. I do not mind the idea of his being drunk. It's a thing all men do when they're young. I'm used to the idea of it," which suggests, of course, she's never actually done it. It's an idea for her, drunkenness, not something you do. My brothers were wild at his age. What hurt last night was that there was nothing happy about him." So you get back to this recurring motif of the two types of drinking. Her brothers, from what we don't have time to talk, unfortunately, about her brothers, because they're from an old reticent family. There's a great deal of the history of England's attached to them. They go off to fight in World War I and are both killed. But you can be sure that, yes, they had a Chester Bellockian way of imbibing fermented and distilled beverages. As Belloc said, there's nothing worth the wear of winning than laughter and the love of friends. Well, gathering together in an inn and having several pints of ale and perhaps singing, drinking songs is all very well. But the thing that's Lady Marshman has done, there's nothing happy about the way that Sebastian and Lord Marshman drank. They're not drinking as part of this vivacious, conviviality. They're drinking, taking it as a drug in order to attain oblivion or escape from responsibilities. "I slept very little last night," she says. And all the night I kept coming back to that one thing. He was so unhappy. So, is she being judgmental? Is she willing the good of the other? Which is the classic philosophical definition of love, is to will the good of the other. He's so unhappy. That's what's making her unhappy, is his unhappiness, not because he's a drunken bum and what have you. So let's see how he talks later. Middle of the next page. Mr. Samgross says he is noisy and high-spirited, I believe, she said, with a faint light of humour streaking the clouds. So again, sometimes we get a little hint of a sense of humour. I believe you and he tease Mr. Samgrass rather. It's naughty of you. I'm very fond of Mr. Samgrass, and you should be too, after all he's done for you. But I think perhaps, if I were your age and a man, I might be just a little inclined to tease Mr. Samgrass myself. Now, I don't mind that, but last night and this morning are something quite different. You see, it's all happened before. So she's seeing in Sebastian a representation. In some sense, she's reliving what she went through with her husband 20 or so years earlier. All right, where are we moving from here? Got to keep an eye on the clock. 163. So Lady Marshman is acting to make Sebastian live at Monsignor Bell's, to stop him from getting drunk. And Charles complains. He says he must feel free. And Lady Marshman says, but he's been free, always, up till now. And look at the result. Sebastian was in my room, was waiting for me. I'm going to cable to Papa, he said. He won't let them force me into this priest's house. So is Lady Marshman right to try to stop Charles from drinking? Page 193. This is crucial. This is the part of the novel when I first read it, which made me feel least sympathetic towards Lady Marshman. Next morning I said to Sebastian, tell me honestly, do you want me to stay on here? No, Charles, I don't believe I do. I'm no help? No help. So I went to make my excuses to his mother. There's something I must ask you, Charles. Did you give Sebastian money yesterday? Yes. Knowing how he was likely to spend it? Yes. I don't understand it, she said. I simply don't understand how anyone can be so callously wicked. She paused, but I do not think she expected any answer. There was nothing I could say unless I were to start all over again on that familiar, endless argument. I'm not going to reproach you, she said. God knows it's not for me to reproach anyone. Any failure in my children is my failure. But I don't understand it. I don't understand how you can have been so nice in so many ways and then do something so wantonly cruel. I don't understand how we all liked you so much. Did you hate us all the time? I don't understand how we deserved it. I was unmoved, etc., he says. Now, what I want to look at here, if this is, when she's very upset. It's the most upset I think we see her, at least expressively, right? She normally keeps herself stoically under control, and whether that's a good or bad thing is something else I want you to be thinking about. Whether if she lightened up a bit, she might be happier, on the assumption she's not as happy as she could be. She might be a better mother. Now, I'm putting that out there. But look at this. I don't understand. About 5 times she says it. I don't understand, she said. I simply don't understand, and a few lines down, but I don't understand it. I don't understand how. I don't understand how. I don't understand how. So it's about 6 times in that. She doesn't understand, right? She's just exasperated by the fact that she just doesn't get it. This is the point, by the way, when Charles leaves Brideshead, when he thinks it's the last time, top of page 195. I have left behind illusion, I said to myself. Henceforth I live in a world of 3 dimensions with the aid of my 5 senses. So this is, he turns his back on Brideshead. And I mentioned before that Brideshead, the name, Brideshead's the bridegroom, and in some sense, Brideshead, the place, and its occupants, in some sense, symbolic of the church and the members of the church, and of course, every member of the church except for the Blessed Mother is a miserable sinner of one sort or another. So we've got that represented in the Flight family here, all types of Catholics. But nonetheless, this is a world that for Charles has something to it. There's a whole spiritual dimension which he doesn't see anywhere else. He's turned his back on that. Turned his back on Brideshead. I've left behind illusion. All that religious stuff, all that spiritual stuff. Henceforth, I live in a world of 3 dimensions with the aid of my 5 senses. I often cite this as one of the most succinct definitions of atheism I've ever read. There's nothing but 3 dimensions perceived with 5 senses. There is nothing else. But then, this is very important, who's the narrator of this? The older Charles. Immediately afterwards, I have since learned that there is no such world. I don't even need these. It's a miracle. My eyes are the light's obviously good in here because I do really need them. I have since learned that there is no such world, but then as the car turned out of sight of the house, I thought it took no finding, but lay all about me at the end of the avenue. So here, 20 years later, he's learned through experience, there's no such world as merely 3 dimensions and 5 senses. Reality is deeper than that. There's more to it than that. Let's move on. I have to cut to the chase in a moment, unfortunately. 198. So this is Rex Mottram. We've had nothing much to say about him. He's a hollow man. Read Eliot's poem as homework if you want to know what a hollow man is. The Hollow Man by Eliot. Did you stay long at Brideshead? So Charles says, they meet in Paris. Was my name mentioned after I left? Was it mentioned? I got sick of the sound of it, old boy. The Marchioness, so Lady Marshman, got what she called a bad conscience about you. She pulled it on pretty thick, I gather, at your last meeting. So Lady Marshman's own view of her behaviour, where she didn't understand and got angry with Charles, is that she behaved poorly, that she behaved perhaps uncharitably. She allowed her anger or her lack of understanding to get the better of her. All right, so I'm going to have to cut the chaser just because we have to. But so she wants to meet Charles on her deathbed. And quite clearly what she's doing is she's making her peace, right, with everybody. And she's carried with her to her deathbed a sense of guilt for that one meeting with Charles, and seeks reconciliation with him. She also asked Julia to ask Charles if he has any influence on Sebastian, to get Sebastian to come and see her. Sebastian, by the way, we don't have time to read now, we're running out of time. When he's told that his mother's dying, the first thing he does is in the hospital, basically an alcoholic. First thing is look up, it's the monastery, it's a hospital run by monks of Franciscan friars, to be precise. He looks up and he looks at an icon, an oleograph, an oil, a painting of the 7 sorrows of Mary. So the suffering mother. And then he looks at that, and then immediately he says, basically his mother could kill at a touch. So there's a moment at which he sees the suffering of his mother, and then that's immediately eclipsed by his hatred of her. All right, now we're going to go on. So we have Good Friday. The chapel's closed. I read that last week, so we don't have to read that again about the Blessed Sacrament removed from the chapel, and that's just an empty shell. It's like it's always going to be Good Friday. Symbolically, the end of that part. Happens, of course, after the death of Lady Marshman. So Lady Marshman has now left the story. Elvis has left the building. Right? Lady Marshman has left the building. So is that the end of the case? We've now looked at all the evidence. We'll read this one very important thing if I can find it quickly. 355 maybe. It's when Bridie just basically drops a bombshell. He drops 2 bombshells. One is when he discovers that Rex has already been married. The other is when he tells Julia that he can't bring Brenda because she's has Catholic sensibilities, and he said, I don't ask any questions about which of the 2 men you're living with, you're sleeping with. That's your concern, but that's not, he can't possibly bring his fiancée there. And that really slaps Julia in the face because it's a bombshell. No, okay. Let me just, something else I want to mention. God help us. Page 355. This is Cordelia. We're not saying enough about her. And Charles says, I suppose he doesn't suffer. Speaking about Sebastian. Oh, yes, I think he does. One can have no idea what the suffering may be, to be maimed as he is. No dignity, no power of will. No one is ever holy without suffering. That's a motif for this whole novel. No one is ever holy without suffering. The effort to avoid suffering leads to suffering. The effort to avoid the cross leads to our crucifying ourselves. All right, so let's move on. So Lord Marshmane's death scene, we have to give this due attention. So Providence, Brideshead's not there. When Lord Marshmane's obviously on his deathbed, he could die at any moment. Brideshead's not there. Brideshead tries to call the priest earlier, and the result is he gets disinherited. He certainly suffers for his faith. Cordelia says Papa doesn't want a priest yet. In other words, this is not the right time. Bride lacks that nuance. Good at bombshells, but not a subtlety. So who's there? Cordelia, Brideshead not there. Sebastian obviously isn't. It's the prodigal son or the prodigal daughter who's there. Only Julia is the only representative of the family. There's no escape. The decisions are on her shoulders. Sorry, I'm at the bridey part of it. Is this the end? Julia asked. This is page 386. It's impossible to say, the doctor answered. When he does die, it will probably be like this. He may recover from the present attack. The only thing is not to disturb him. The least shock will be fatal. So the path of least resistance is to do nothing, even though he's could be about to die. I'm going for Father Mackay, she said. I was not surprised. I had seen it in her mind all the summer. When she had gone, I said to the doctor, we must stop this nonsense. So if you like, the church has driven a wedge between Charles and Julia. Father Mackay turns up. He says, I have seen so many men and women die, said the priest. I never knew them sorry to have me there at the end. But they were Catholics. Lord Marshman has never been one except in name, at any rate not for years. He was a scoffer. Carver said so. And the priest responds, Christ came to call not the righteous, but sinners to repentance. And then there's a wall of fire between Julia and me. Julia, who had been standing still and silent, suddenly moved. Thank you for your advice, doctor, she said. I take full responsibility for whatever happens. Father Mackay, will you please come and see my father now? Without looking at me, led him to the door. The priest bent over Lord Marshman and blessed him. Julia and Carver knelt at the foot of the bed. The doctor, the nurse, and I stood behind them. So what a menagerie of miserable sinners, right? All of the practicing Catholics are absent, not of their own fault. Now, said the priest, I know you are sorry for all the sins of your life, aren't you? Make a sign if you can. You're sorry, aren't you? But there was no sign. Try and remember your sins. Tell God you are sorry. I'm going to give you absolution. While I'm giving it, tell God you are sorry you've offended him. He began to speak in Latin. I recognized the words ego te absolvo in nomine patris, and saw the priest make the sign of the cross. Now this is beautiful. Then I knelt too. This is Charles. And I knelt too and prayed. O God, if there is a God, forgive him his sins, if there is such a thing as sin. And the man on the bed opened his eyes and gave a sigh, the sort of sigh I had imagined people made at the moment of death, but his eyes moved so that we knew there was still life in him. I suddenly felt the longing for a sign, if only of courtesy, if only for the sake of the woman I loved, who knelt in front of me, praying, I knew, for a sign. It seemed so small a thing that was asked, the bare acknowledgement of a present a nod in the crowd. I prayed more simply, God, forgive him his sins. And please, God, make him accept your forgiveness. So small a thing to ask. The priest took the little silver box from his pocket and spoke again in Latin, touching the dying man with an oily wad. He finished what he had to do, put away the box, and gave the final blessing. Suddenly, Lord Marshman moved his hand to his forehead. I thought he had felt the touch of the chrism and was wiping it away. Oh God, I prayed, don't let him do that. But there was no need for fear. The hand moved slowly down his breast, then to his shoulder, and Lord Marshman made the sign of the cross. Then I knew that the sign I had asked for was not a little thing, not a passing nod of recognition, and a phrase came back to me from my childhood of the veil of the temple being rent from top to bottom. It was over. We stood up. The nurse went back to the oxygen cylinder. The doctor went over his patient. Julia whispered to me, will you see Father Mackay out? I'm staying here for a little. Charles prays to a God he doesn't even know exists. Why? Because of his love for Julia, willing the good of the other. He's not angry with her because that she's fighting this superstitious nonsense, this fire that was between them. He wants her to be happy, the willing the good of the other. He knows that that's what she's praying for. He's joining her in prayer. And the first shall be last and last shall be first is probably his prayer that's answered. He gets exactly what he prays for. Lord Marshman doesn't wipe the chrism away, he crosses himself. He accepts forgiveness. Bridie's not there, Cordelia's not there. Julia, the miserable sinner's there. Charles, the non-believer, is there, and it's their prayers. Prayer of the heathen, whose prayers are answered. All right, I'm going to read two things if I can find it quickly. It's very important. It was mentioned last night. I'm going to find this quickly. I am going to find this quickly. I'm going to insist on finding it quickly. 374, because this is important for our Lady Marshman thing, and then we're going to have Easter Sunday. So this is Julia. When Bridie, this is page 329, when Bridie pricks her conscience, living in sin, with sin, always the same, like an idiot child, carefully nursed, guarded from the world. Poor Julia, they say, she can't go out. She's got to take care of her sin. Pity it's ever lived, they say, but it's so strong. Children like that always are. Julia's so good to her little mad sin. And skip a paragraph. Past and future, the years when I was trying to be a good wife, in the cigar smoke, while the countess clicked on the backgammon board, and the man who was dummy at the men's table filled the glasses, when I was trying to bear his child, torn in pieces by something already dead, putting him away, forgetting him, finding you, the past 2 years with you, all the future with you, all the future with or without you, war coming, world ending, sin. A word from so long ago from Nanny Hawkins, stitching by the hearth, and the nightlight burning before the Sacred Heart. Cordelia and me with the catechism in Mummy's room before luncheon on Sundays. Mummy carrying my sin with her to church, bowed under it and the black lace veil in the chapel. Slipping out with it in London before the fires were lit, taking it with her through the empty streets where the milkman's ponies stood with their forefeet on the pavement. Mummy dying with my sin eating at her more cruelly than her own deadly illness. Mummy dying with it, Christ dying with it, nailed hand and foot, hanging over the bed in the night nursery, hanging year after year in the dark little study at Farm Street with the shining oilcloth, hanging in the dark church where only the old charwoman raises the dust and one candle burns, hanging at noon high among the crowds and the soldiers, no comfort except the sponge of vinegar and the kind words of a thief, hanging forever, never the cool sepulchre and the grave clothes spread on the stone slab, never the oil and spices in the dark cave, always the midday sun and the dice clicking for the seamless coat. Apart from that being absolutely beautiful prose. This is, under the surface of Julia, she's a Catholic. She's trying to escape from it. She doesn't want the suffering, doesn't want the cross. She wants to avoid the cross. She wants happiness. As Sebastian says towards the beginning of the novel, what's happiness got to do with it? All right, so that's, if you like, an image of Good Friday. And then right at the very end in the epilogue. Well, first of all, I mentioned the metaphor of the avalanche, which I did want to do. Did I mention it last week? Okay, well, the other metaphor is the avalanche. And the main one, I'm probably not going to get a chance to find it quickly enough to read it. It's the end of a chapter. Charles senses that there's a barrier come between him and Julia, and it's like two people in the cozy warmth of an Arctic hut. Well, there's not two people, just an Arctic hut. But it's obviously this is a metaphor for Julia and Charles. They're warm in their Arctic hut. The rest of the world is cold, freezing, blizzard, uncomfortable, unhappy. But there they are, in the front of the cozy fire in their Arctic hut, comfortable and warm. But at the top of the mountain, when the sun comes out, the ice at the top of the mountain's melted. Avalanche begins, and it comes tumbling down the mountains, and the Arctic hut is reduced to splinters. And then the very final, that's mentioned 3 times, but the final time is right at the very end of the book. So basically he says, I can't see you ever again, Julia says to him. The avalanche was down, the hillside swept bare behind it, the last echoes died on the white slopes, the new mound glittered and lay still in the silent valley. Right, their love is destroyed. Well, their relationship is not going to end in marriage. All right, now then the epilogue is very important. And Charles meets Nanny Hawkins and learns that Julia and Cordelia and Bridie are together. The war's going on, of course. And where are they? Well, it's clear that they are in Palestine. So the novel ends with the family united in the Holy Land, with all the significance that speaks of itself. And then Charles says at the end here to Hooper, who doesn't understand, talk about the house, Brideshead. That's not what it was built for. No, not what it was built for. Perhaps that's one of the pleasures of building, like having a son, wondering how he'll grow up. I don't know. I never built anything, and I forfeited the right to watch my son grow up. I'm homeless, childless, middle-aged, loveless, Hooper. What a happy ending. Well, it's not the ending, though, because this is the ending. He finds himself in the chapel at Brideshead. The tabernacle once more has the Blessed Sacrament in it. There's the red lamp glowing beside it. Something quite remote from anything the builders intended has come out of their work and out of the fierce little human tragedy in which I played. Something none of us thought about at the time. A small red flame, a beaten copper lamp of deplorable design relit before the beaten copper doors of a tabernacle. The flame which the old knights saw from their tombs, which they saw put out, that flame burns again for other soldiers far from home, farther in heart than Acre or Jerusalem. It could not have been lit but for the builders and the tragedians. And there I found it this morning, burning anew among the old stones. I quickened my pace and reached the hut which served us for our ante-room. You're looking unusually cheerful today, said the second in command. Well, we don't have 5 minutes left, but what a happy ending. So the novel ends on Easter Sunday symbolically. Resurrection, Charles quite clearly, he says he prays a new form of words we only recently learned. He's clearly either been received in the church or is on the path to reception into the church. He's a convert to the faith. So is it about happiness? I suppose philosophically the question depends upon what do we actually mean by happiness. Okay, so why did Charles care so much about not having the priest brought in? Good question, and I think the reason is, of course, that he first of all, I think various reasons. First of all, the religion has been the problem for him, right? It's been the nuisance with relationship with Sebastian, relationship with Julia. He obviously antagonistic towards it. He's not a believer at this point, obviously, at all. He's not even saying those prayers. He's not, and he sees that this is something which is just going to put the wedge in between him and Julia even more, and he wants to stop it for that reason. I think that's as simple as that. Is that the church, religion, is the enemy that's preventing his worldly happiness. And really, I think that Lord Marshman, if in some sense, symbolizes his own antagonism towards the church. Why would he want that to be? Why would he want Lord Marshman to surrender? Right? Yeah, that's a great question. Obviously, the key thing about understanding literature and indeed life is understanding the voices that are speaking. Who are they? What motivates them? Why are they saying and doing what they're doing? And if you don't understand that in reading of human character, either in a novel or in life, then you're going to get things drastically wrong. I think what he does with Cordelia is someone that embraces the cross fully. I mean, when she's a precocious young child, she doesn't really get it because she's a kid. But basically, she goes through, she willingly suffers, she goes out the Spanish Civil War, serves in the ambulances, and she has an absolutely deep sympathy for sinners, largely, I think, because she sees herself as one. And like Bridie, does not see that Sebastian's weakness in itself is sinful. That his weakness can be his strength. And she sees that his suffering actually is necessary for his spiritual growth, and sees it through that prism, through that lens. And that's because she's profoundly deep, and I would say saintly Catholic. The only Bridie, I think, and Lady Marshman are better than most people think they are. I really do think that's a question of maturity in the reader. And I think the whole point is, it really does get, the raw nerve is, what's the meaning of life? Is the meaning of life the creature comforts? Is the meaning of life finding comfort and happiness through the absence of suffering? Or is the meaning of life taking up our cross and following Christ and gaining a joy which is deeper than any human happiness in so doing? That's the mystery. I think this is why this is a deep, very, very deep Christian meditation. Great literature for me. I mean, this is the way I get my deep contemplative musings upon the deepest aspects of theology and philosophy through stories. And there's nothing wrong with that, because that's the way Christ shows us most of the important lessons. The novel was published in 1945, right at the end of World War II, where the British people in a it's ironic, basically seeking comfort after the war. They vote in a Labour government because we're going to have a glorious socialist future where there's going to be no suffering, nothing but justice. So they had this blind optimism. And they saw this book, for the most part, it was criticized for being snobbish, for treating the aristocracy in too idealistic light, for not being part of the golden future, but being stuck in the dead past. So they didn't understand any of this, really. I mean, War says in the early part of the book that the thing about tradition is that the people could plant things in a garden knowing what they would look like 100 years later. That's what tradition does. It gives to reality a permanence, relatively speaking, that the transience of worshipping a golden age in a mythical future is never going to do. But no, it was not well received. But it's, who cares? Well, I mean, in the metaphor of the twitch upon the thread, the actual line, the fishing line, is grace. It's the direct connection between the fisherman and the fish, okay? That's the grace of God. The hook is how suffering is the means by which that grace penetrates the hardened heart. So Oscar Wilde says in the Ballad of Reading Gaol, "But God's eternal laws are kind and break the heart of stone, for how else but through a broken heart may Lord Christ enter in." You know, the twitch upon the thread is the breaking of the heart, so that the heart can be penetrated by the love of God, and so that the heart can love itself, because a hardened heart cannot love. Thank you.